All right, so now we're going to do that energy ball or something like a will-o-wisp. Okay, so first thing, always make sure that your scene is set up correctly. Okay, if you go down here, go to your preferences, make sure that playback speed is set to play every frame. Maximum playback speed is set to free. All right, that's good. Then right click on your timeline, go to cache playback, make sure this is unchecked, right? So you have to make sure those are set before you start doing any sort of dynamics work. Also, don't forget to make a new project, right? For my case, I have this new one, Will-O-Wisp. Okay, so I'm good. I can start working now. So let's get a sphere. Scale it a little bit. Please, not too loud, please. Thank you. Uh, right, let's just say too flat. Okay, so I'm going to be emitting from this sphere, right? And I want a few more divisions on it. Get it as smooth as I can. Okay, so I select this in my effects menu set, right? I go to end particles and I say emit from object. So this makes a few things. So under the sphere object here in my outliner, you can see there's the emitter. It creates the particle itself and the nucleus. So remember, the emitter is the one that emits the particles or where the particles come from. The particles, this object is the particles itself, the system itself, and the nucleus is kind of where you keep uh, the basic rules. So gravity, wind, stuff like that. Okay. It's also your solver. So if you want it to solve better, right, you would adjust the settings here in the nucleus. For now, in the nucleus, see, I have my nucleus selected. I'm in my attribute editor. I want to turn gravity to 0 so that it's emitting in all directions and not falling. Okay, if I go to my emitter, I want to make sure my emitter type is set to surface. If this is set to omni, every single vertex is emitting, right? But if I set this to surface, it's the faces that are emitting, and which is what we want. And I want to up the number of particles. Okay, right. Now I want this to be a bit less uniform. So the one way I can do that is to use an image, which is black and white, okay, to specify which parts of the object emit and to specify which parts don't. So basically, if it's black, no emission. If it's white, there's going to be an emission. Okay. Now in my hypershade, I'm going to make a surface shader. I'm going to apply that here. Now this step is not necessary for the effect to work. This step is just so that I can see what I'm doing. Okay. So again, assign a surface shader. And in the surface shader's color slot, okay, click on the checkered box at the end. I want to add a pattern. Could be a noise, could be a fractal, basically anything that can be black and white. Okay, so if I go to my 2D textures, let's see. Yeah, maybe just a noise. Okay, and if I press 6 here in the viewport, I can see the noise pattern. Right, so the noise right now, my settings are here. The type is billow. I want to make it Perlin. Can be any. It's like Perlin better. Um, if you want better delineation between black and white, turn the amplitude up, say 5, right? So you get this. You can adjust your ratio, right? Frequency ratio, all these depth max, all these things. Say time, so it can change a bit, right? Frequency is pretty much the size. So you see a higher frequency, I have smaller chunks of black, okay? Implode, you can look for something that works for you. Again, if you get a different kind of noise, the effects are going to be different. So wave, wispy, wispy is not bad. Space time maybe could be okay. So let's say something like this, right? And then I go back to my emitter, scroll all the way down, and go to these texture emission attributes. Make sure that's open. So open that. And I have texture rate. Check. Enable texture rate. And I want to now drag and drop. So middle mouse drag and drop the file that I'm using. So this noise file. Middle mouse drag and drop. Okay. I could also do that from here. Okay. And then now, if I hit play and I press 5, you can see there are blank spots, like bald spots. Okay. So it's not very regular. Okay. Another way of getting rid of the regularity is in your emitter, you can change the speed and give it a random value. Right now, the speed is at 1. So all the particles are emitted with the speed of 1. I can make this, for example, 3, give or take 2. All right. So when you say random, right, it's give or take, so plus minus. So the slowest a particle can be is 1, and the fastest is 5. See? So visibly now you can see they're not all the same. Some are much faster, some are much slower. Okay, go. I can even hide the object now. There you go. Next, I want to adjust the color of this. So I select my particle. Okay, and here, well, lifespan. Let's do lifespan first. So you go to lifespan, and I'll give this a random range as well. So a lifespan of 2, give or take 1. There you go. So they all die out at a certain point. By the way, if you want to see how many particles you have, just go to display, heads up display, and check particle count. Okay. So here I can play and I can stop on any frame and it'll tell me how many particles I have on that frame. So I have 10,000 plus plus particles right now. Okay. So don't be scared of turning up your rate very much. Like if I put this at 50,000 instead. Okay. What you always want to look at is this number. How many particles do you actually have? Okay. So 50,000 particles are emitted per second, but then a lot of them die out. Okay, remember that. Okay. So now back to my particles and I go down to shading. Okay. And here I have color and I want to change my color input. Set my color input to age. Okay, so that means now the particles color can change depending on its age. So it's born one color, it'll die another. Okay. And then for the input max, you want to look at the lifespan. So 2 plus minus 1, the oldest a particle can ever get is 3. So I set that to 3. And then now, here in my graph, ramp more accurately, I can adjust the color. So when I click inside the ramp, I'm making a new slider. And then clicking the circle selects it. Clicking the square deletes it. So now I can click there and get, let's say, something bluish, maybe, right? So this is pure white. This is somewhat bluish. And then I can move on to like a more blue color and say shift the darker shade now. There you go. So you see it changes depending on age, right? Next thing is you want to introduce some sort of field because right now the particles are just traveling basically depending on the initial settings from the emitter. So their speed doesn't change, their directions don't change. And you can introduce more randomness with a field, which is essentially a force, right, that pushes around your particles in a particular way. And the most common one, pretty much every time I use a particle, I use this, is a turbulence field. So first select your particles. Do that in the viewport or here in the outliner. And then once that's selected, go to fields and solvers and choose a turbulence field. Okay. So the way a turbulence field works is it adds a noise pattern basically to your particle's motion. Okay. The magnitude. Okay. See, I'm editing this in my attribute editor. Okay. So magnitude is strength. That's how strong the field is or how much effect it has on the particle. Attenuation is basically a distance setting. So the higher this is, the closer to the particle this turbulence field has to be for it to affect it. If this is 0, the turbulence field will affect the particles regardless of how far or how close they are. See, so now you have this sort of tendrils that are forming. Okay, so let's bump the magnitude up to say 10. There you go. Now, frequency is the size of your noise pattern. So look at this now. I have 10 drills going this way, that way. If I turn this down to like 0.5, I'll have fewer but larger tendrils. See? All right. Okay. If I turn this even lower, see, you'll get a much bigger pattern. If I turn this up, let's say 1.5, you get a lot of smaller tendrils instead. So this now becomes a matter of artistic direction, what you're looking for. I can even go up to 2. I can have much smaller tendrils. Okay. Also, if you select your particle and let's go up here to dynamic properties, there is a conserve value. Conserve stands for conservation of energy. Okay. So at 1, right, with the conservation of 1, the particles don't lose energy. So if, for example, a particle wasn't affected by any other field, it would just keep on going. But if I had a lower value, say 0.97, the particle would eventually lose energy and stop. Okay, and which is how things work in the real world. So it's always good to have some sort of conserved value lower than one. But what that also does when you're dealing with a turbulence field is when you lower this value, you'll see that the particles tend to clump more. Okay, so if I lower this, like it's 0.97, say 0.94, see, you get these clumps that may or may not be what you're after, but you know, you can adjust it this way. So 0.91. And you'll probably see it more with the slightly smaller uh, value. There you go. Now you're seeing the clumping. And perhaps we want the lifespan to be a bit longer, let's say 3 seconds, give or take 1.5, in which case I would now have to edit my color and make this so 3 plus 1.5, set this at 4.5 max. See, so now the particles are all there. Now, it's always a good idea to make a play blast. What you see here is not real time. So if I right click on my timeline and just select play blast, it gives me a short preview, and this is going to be in real time. So this is where I can judge, oh, things are too slow, I want it a bit faster, right? So let's cancel that. Okay, so I can see, right? It's an okay speed. I might want it a bit faster, right? I might want to adjust the turbulence a bit. Okay, so we can introduce even more irregularities. Okay, so one way is if you take your sphere and you start rotating it, right? Because then the parts that are emitting are going to be different. You could also just grab your texture and manipulate that, but rotating works. So let's keyframe the rotation values. I'm going to go to frame 200, and I'm just going to randomly rotate this. There we go. And let's hide that again. Okay, and you're seeing some change, some undulation, right? Uh, Another thing that can help is if you animate the turbulence field itself. Okay, in your turbulence field, you can animate the phase values. That means it just moves the noise pattern. But you could also animate the position value. For example, I can be selected here, middle mouse click to frame 200. Let's say adjust that. Middle mouse is 100, adjust it down here. So you're going to see the pattern moving and changing over time. See? That's something that you want. And again, you can play blast, see how it looks. Now it's a good idea to play blast with a lower value because, of course, if you need a lot of particles and you're testing at a lot of particles, it's going to slow you down. So it's good to play blast with a low or medium amount of particles. Then when you're pretty much ready to cache, you turn them up. Okay, so it's getting somewhere. Now it's just a matter of um, finding and tweaking.